Hey everybody, this is Rustin Rose with Metalholic Magazine and Mojo Radio, and with me today the mastermind behind BlancaWhite and their debut album Resurgence of Rock, Ken Savage. How are you doing, brother?
I am doing great, Rustin. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely wonderful to have you. Your project is a very unique one, and for those who don't know anything about it yet, my understanding is you're really just a fan who got fed up with the fact that the classic rock that we grew up on and loved, just there was no more of it, and you finally said, enough is enough, I'm going to create some of my own. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a very humble story. I'm really just a fan of hard rock music. Grew up in the late 70s and 1980s and listened to all the classic hard rock bands of the day. And, I always loved that music and continued to love it, even, as the 90s wore on and became a little harder to get to. And I ended up becoming a lawyer, and I'm actually calling you from Paris, France, right now, and
wow.
where I live. Even though I'm from Texas originally, but I travel a lot in my career, and I just always had on my iPod a bunch of hard rock songs, and I got to the point 2.5, 3 years ago where I just heard so many of the same songs so many times, and it's getting harder and harder to find good classic hard rock music, and so I just said to myself, I'm going to try and create my own album and rock project, and that's how this odyssey began.
Well, and my understanding was you started out by just sitting down writing lyrics for it, and sort of how did it come together from there?
I did. We did this the hardest way. I've since learned that most people do the music first, but I actually wrote out the lyrics for each of the songs on the album a couple of years ago, and then I teamed up with a really extraordinary musician in Austin, Texas, named Austin Shell. We call him Austin from Austin, and he put together the musical side of the album, and it took us 10 or 12 months to get everything down the way we thought it should be. And then we were kind of in this curious position. We were a little bit like the Alan Parsons Project, two guys just writing music, and we had to go out and find people to play, and that led us on this search for some of the great singers that we have performing on the album.
Right. No, and I want to talk about them in a minute because you got some seriously incredible names. And we know we're going to talk about the vocalists, but who did you get to perform all the music beyond the vocals?
Austin performs a lot of the rhythm guitar and some of the lead guitar on the album. We also brought in some specialized guitarists from the Austin-based rock band BlancaWhite. Mm-hmm. We've got a drummer from Austin, Texas, named Phil Hook, who's played there on the hard rock scene for years. And then all of the vocal talents on the album are really from the west coast of the U.S. Right. Paul Shortino is based in Vegas, and our other singers and some of the backup singers are based in L.A.
So how does a rock fan who's living in Paris end up connecting with the likes of Paul Shortino, Lorraine Lewis, Terry Lou, and Jeff Paris?
Well, we got to a point after working on the album and getting the songs ready to go, which took us about a year. We got to the point where it was time to try and find some vocalists to perform on the album, and we sort of auditioned people in the U.S. and Canada and a couple people in Europe for about 2 or 3 months, and what we were really looking for, what we were really striving for, was to try and find vocalists who would match each of the songs. So we had very kind of specific ideas in mind about what kind of voice would work on each of the songs, and we first had this idea about 3 or 4 months into it of, well, maybe we ought to try and contact some of the real rock stars from back in the 1980s. And so it took us a couple of more months to find, we originally found Terry Lou of XYZ, who's been touring with Great White for the past couple of years, and he was the first one we found. And then we literally went through about another year of trying to find the other 3 singers on the album.
You've got 4 different vocalists on the album, obviously, but having listened to the album, there's still a solid thread of continuity rolling through it that that it's the same project. How did you guys go about making sure that you had that sense that it was still all one project?
Well, I think one thing we did, and I think it's one of the unique features of the album, is that even though the album sounds like an album from the late 70s or 1980s musically, it's all written from the perspective of someone today, you know, kind of in their middle-aged years. So, you know, the songs either look back on the 1980s era with fondness, you know, or they address kind of midlife issues. So I think one of the things that ties everything together is the perspective. The other thing we really tried to do was just simply to make this album fun. I mean, my belief has always been that, you know, music as of about 1994, 1995 got way too preachy and too political, and, you know, there was so much angst attached to it. And so we really, although there's some serious subjects on this album, we try and keep it all fun and really hope people just dig it for the music itself and enjoy it. You know, we're not trying to sort of accomplish any higher goal with it.
When you first sat down and started writing those lyrics, what was the first one that you wrote that ended up on the project? Which track?
The first one I wrote was the title song, Resurgence of Rock, which is really our anthem song and what we stand for and what we're all about, trying to really help bring back some of that classic hard rock sounds from the 80s. All
right, so I got to ask you then, because you and I are both, you know, we're both at that point in our lives, we're looking back fondly on this stuff. What are 5 essential albums in your collection that everybody should own, that you can't live without?
Well, you know, I mean, the biggest influence on this album, at least in terms of the lyrics and my writing of the lyrics, was probably AC/DC. So, you know, I mean, there's just a couple of classic albums like Back in Black that, you know, I just don't think you can do without. Van Halen was also another influence on the album. In particular, this album kind of has a lot of strong partying themes and partying down in Mexico type themes. We've our name BlancaWhite is based on a bar just south of the Texas border town where I grew up in northern Mexico, where we used to all go party back in the 1980s. And frankly, some of the Sammy Hagar era, you know, Van Halen stuff was an influence as well. I think Judas Priest and Def Leppard and, you know, Motley Crue and some of the other, you know, great bands from the 80s were also influences. But, you know, those are probably the bands that had the biggest influence on the album.
What was it like for you? Because obviously you pulled the Elton John thing where you wrote the lyrics and, you know, like Bernie Taupin, and then you had Austin come in and write the music. So what was it like for you to suddenly hear your lyrics, your ideas come to life in musical form?
It was amazing, and it was really rewarding. You know, I didn't know when I wrote the lyrics exactly how the songs would sound. I kind of had a basic melody in mind, but nothing real sophisticated. And Austin came in and really added his musical, you know, genius to it. And then, frankly, the other stage was when we started getting back the vocals tracks from the singers. I mean, they just, you know, they really made each of these songs their own, and we asked them to do that. We told them, you know, we're not fancy producers, and we're not going to sit there and lord it over you. You know, take each of these songs and really make them your own. And when we got the vocals tracks back, and I could begin to tell what the songs were really going to sound like, that was pretty exciting.
I'll bet. So now, yeah, I know this was like a project for you to create something that you had been missing for a long time. Is this, in your mind, a one-off project? Or are you going to keep going with this, keep coming up with more stuff, or?
No, we'd like to do more. And in fact, Austin and I have already started working just in the last couple of months on the second album. You know, when you're involved in a project like this and it goes on for a couple of years, you know, at some point you get tired of hearing the song so many times. So right. I had a point a couple of months ago where I just got fed up again, and I said, I'm going to start trying to write some new material. So we've begun to do that, and certainly hope that there will be future albums.
So are you sort of doing it the old-fashioned way now, where he's coming up with some riffs and it's giving you lyrical ideas, or?
No, we're still probably going to do it the same way, with the lyrics first.
The Taupin Elton John thing. Hey, it worked for them.
We try and do it the hard way as much as we can.
That's okay, as long as it comes out and it's great rock and roll. That's really all that matters. It's the music that's the bottom line. So, are there any? I know that you love all the songs, even though you're probably worn thin now. You need more new music of your own. But are there one or two tracks on the album, aside from Resurgence of Rock, that are particularly special to you now that they're all completed?
Well, my personal favorite on the song is "Living It Up in a Mexican" on the album is "Living It Up in a Mexican Bar." That's the song that I essentially wrote based on my teenage years south of the border at BlancaWhite's bar in Matamoros, Mexico, and that's one of the really, really fun songs on the album. There's another song on the album called "Your Boyfriend Is Lame." That's the song that's sung by Terry Alou, and it's a pretty interesting song. It's meant to be very kind of tongue-in-cheek and AC/DC-ish in its lyrics, and in the first verse of the song is set in the U.S., the second verse of the song is set in Mexico, and the third verse of the song is set in France. And I don't know if you know this, but Terry Alou's father was French and his mother was Spanish, and he grew up in Europe speaking both languages at home.
Right.
And then he's been out in L.A. for about the past 25 years, so he's also fluent in English. And there's a line in the song where the guy tells the girl, "Your boyfriend is lame," and then the first stanza of that line's in English, the second stanza of that line's in Spanish, and the third stanza of that line's in French. And he actually sings the entire song with no accent in any of the three languages. So I think that song's pretty cool and special.
That's always been incredible to me, that you can have people that have really thick accents, and when they sing, suddenly it's just all gone. I've always been amazed by that.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But to actually find a singer like Terry who can sing in all three languages fluently, with very little accent is pretty incredible.
Right. And again, Terry Alou from XYZ, now with Great White. I always loved the albums he did back then as well, and it's nice to see him back out and tour and everything now. Obviously, because this is really a recorded project, there's not ever going to be a band that tours or anything like that. This is just sort of a musical thing to throw in your iPod or your CD player and enjoy it that way, right?
I don't think there's ever going to be a really formal tour in the traditional sense. There certainly is some discussion of some limited live shows, probably on the west coast of the U.S. later this spring or summer. But, I think it would be difficult for us to put a whole tour together with four different singers. Yeah.
Well, do something down at Cabo Wabo,
I'd love to do something down at Sammy's Bar.
So what's the most important thing you want people to get out of this record?
I really want people just to enjoy it. I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but again, I really think a lot of the music in the mid-'90s and later on got really kind of political and preachy, and this is really just meant to be an album that people can have fun with and enjoy. There's a lot of liveliness and spirit to it. It's supposed to be just good old fun, classic hard rock, and I just hope people will check it out and enjoy it.
Is the album officially out now, or is it about to come out? Or
yes, the album has been released digitally and electronically on our website, resurgenceofrock.com. We're also on Facebook at Resurgence of Rock. Our CDs and physical product is probably going to be available for order either this weekend, literally in the next 2 or 3 days.
Excellent. Ken, thanks so much for taking the time. I don't know what time it is over there in Paris where you're at now, but we appreciate your staying up late to talk with us. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you when the next one's ready.
All right, Rustin. Thanks so much, and we'll keep you posted on how things progress in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care, Ken.